I've seen a lot of clips circulating of the LINDSAY CLANCY trial. If you're not familiar, LINDSAY CLANCY is the mother who experienced severe postpartum mental health issues following the birth of her third child and ended up unaliving all three of her children, as well as making an attempt on her own life. But to me, what's more shocking than the details of her case has been the public's reaction to the trial. For some bizarre reason, trials in the US are allowed to be recorded and treated like a public spectacle. And what tends to happen anytime you introduce the public to a very sensitive topic is, of course, the public ends up saying some awfully ignorant things. So today I'd like to tell you 3 things that I wish every person understood before they went looking for the LINDSAY CLANCY case. These are not things about the case necessarily, but things about mental illness and our own psychology, about us as the viewer, that we should be mindful of when interacting with this sort of media. So let's talk about it. The first thing I wish is that people had a better understanding of mental health crises, especially postpartum ones and psychosis. When people hear about the brutal way in which 3 innocent children lost their lives, one of them just a baby, they're understandably angry and they want someone to blame. But the truth is, when someone is in psychosis, it's one of the extremely rare situations where a person might not be in control of their own actions or lucid enough to understand what they're doing, to understand what is reality versus delusion. As far as I know, no one is advocating that LINDSAY should walk free. 3 innocent lives were brutally taken, and there needs to be some accountability for that. What's up for debate is her state of mind. It's what determines if she will go to prison or to a mental health facility. I have seen so many misunderstandings about psychosis in various comment sections over the past few weeks. For example, take a look at this comment which says, "She didn't go back to work and had older kids in daycare, and she still the kids. Maybe if she went back to work, kept herself busy and focused, her mental health would have improved. She had too much time on her hands to worry about shit." Psychosis is not the type of thing that you solve by just staying busy and focused. It's an extremely biological reaction, and in this case, seemingly caused by postpartum. The postpartum period causes a massive hormone drop in women, and while some women are lucky enough to not experience very adverse effects of it, others are not as lucky. Plus, the sleeplessness itself can trigger a mental health crisis in and of itself. Sleeplessness is a huge factor in the development of mania. Sometimes if a birth is traumatic, that can also play a role. None of these things that I'm talking about are the fault of the woman experiencing them. Hormonal changes, sleeplessness, trauma. Postpartum mental health issues can look different depending on the person. A lot of women experience severe postpartum depression, where they maybe even have thoughts of wanting to hurt themselves. Some experience postpartum OCD, where they experience intrusive thoughts and compulsions. Sometimes that can include intrusive thoughts of harm befalling them or their child. Some people develop postpartum mania, where their mind is racing, they function on little sleep, they act erratic and high energy, which it sounds like might have been the case for LINDSAY. Some also experience postpartum psychosis, where they experience hallucinations and or delusions, which can sometimes involve commands to do violent things, typically in a way where it's framed as like the only way to save that person. Psychosis requires a very careful titration of medication, because it can take a very long time to find a medication that works for that specific individual. There's a lot of diversity in terms of how someone with psychosis will respond to one medication versus another, and there's often a lot of trial and error that has to be done before they can actually find one that's the right fit for them. A person in psychosis can still very much love the person that they're experiencing delusions about wanting to hurt. Like I said, in a lot of cases, they become convinced that it's the only way to help that person or to save them from evil. You better believe that you too would believe those delusions if you were in their place. It's easy to judge how you would react to a delusion when you're lucid-minded, but when you're in the thick of it, that's literally the definition of a delusion. You strongly believe it, even though there's no evidence for it. Think about the things that you most believe in life. Something super, super basic, like who's the president of the United States or what color is the sky. And then think about suddenly the entire world trying to convince you that you're wrong, that that's not actually true, that you're experiencing a delusion. It would feel impossible. It would would feel like, no, I know this to be true because it feels true. The way people are reacting to this kind of reminds me of the public's reaction to the Tourette's outburst at the BAFTA Awards. You know, like how people acted like, if I had Tourette's syndrome, I would only yell nice things all the time. Which, like, in the case of Tourette's, that's not how it works. By definition, people yell out taboo things because it's kind of like an externalized compulsion. You know, like people with OCD, they experience a lot of intrusive thoughts of like, oh my God, don't do this taboo thing. For people with Tourette's, it's almost like they experience those but externalized, where they actually say the taboo thing, even though it's very ego dystoning, meaning it is completely opposed to how they actually want to be. Their brain is saying like, oh my God, don't offend this person, don't say something insulting, don't demean this person, and it inadvertently does the exact opposite. People were acting so high and mighty about like, you know, if I had Tourette's, I would be perfectly proper all the time, just as people are acting very high and mighty now, saying, you know, if I had psychosis, I would have done things so differently. I would have known that my delusions were delusional. Another misunderstanding that I've been seeing floating around is this idea that like it couldn't have been psychosis because she planned it out. If someone is deep in the throes of a delusion where they think this is the only way to save my family, they might be able to be deceptive for a bit and to act out a plan. It doesn't mean they were in a state of mind where they understood what they were doing. Planning is not necessarily absent when someone's experiencing psychosis. People who are experiencing psychosis can plan lots of different things. There's also a misunderstanding about Patrick Clancy, Lindsay's husband. People say that he seems so flat and emotionless, that he doesn't care about what's happening. And this is just a reminder, you guys, people cope with severe traumas in very different ways. One person could seem flat and emotionless on the outside, but be crying internally. They could seem flat because they've just dissociated from extreme stress, which wouldn't at all surprise me given what he went through. From what I've actually observed of him, he seems kind of emotionally mature to me. He hasn't tried to throw Lindsay under the bus despite immediately cutting her off after what she did. To me, that sounds like someone healthy who's able to acknowledge that, you know, I used to love this person, maybe I do still love this person, and it's not her fault what happened to her, but also she did something so awful that my life will never be the same and I can't forgive that. It takes maturity to integrate those sort of contradicting thoughts. Maturity that the average TikTok commenter unfortunately lacks. The second thing I wish people understood about this case is that there isn't always a villain and a victim. When something terrible like this happens, understandably, people want some sort of retribution for the victims. But something that can happen is that they can start splitting. Splitting is a defense mechanism where you separate different people into all bad versus all good, into villain and victim. And in this case, I think that it comes from empathy, because a lot of people want justice for those children. They are horrified by what those children must have gone through in their last few moments of life. They're looking for someone to blame. Maybe also they want to find someone at fault because it makes them feel more secure that something like that can't ever happen to them. And I've seen people split in completely opposite directions. Some people consider Lindsay the villain and her husband the victim. Others consider her husband the villain and her the victim. Like this comment saying, her husband is literally one of her victims, poor guy. And then someone responding, she is one of his victims and he's the reason this happened, poor woman. Or this, hear me out. He was cheating the whole time. He was claiming he was doing boys brunch and boys night. He was the voice she was hearing. He's the one who killed the kids and flung her off the balcony, and she doesn't recall because she was in psychosis. He's lying about Facebook. He also knows how to give some truth to appear honest. I keep feeling like he killed his kids and convinced her she did it. Sometimes there is no villain. Other times there are multiple villains. Sometimes a person is both villain and victim. Other times both people are victims. Like an example of a situation where there's no villain, something terrible happens and there's not really anyone at fault. You know, like a tiny micro example of this is a child knocking over a glass of milk and their parent starts yelling at them because their gut instinct is to find someone to blame, but it was just an accident. Accidents sometimes happen. No one is at fault. Versus a situation where there are multiple villains. Sometimes you see two people who are both pretty equally awful to each other, who both victimize each other. Like I keep getting these videos from like this pair on TikTok, two different influencers, both of which is claiming that the other one is stalking them. Just like really ugly beef with each other to the point where like, at least from the outside looking in, based on the limited information I have, it kind of feels like both of them are villains in each other's stories. What's an example of a situation where someone is both villain and victim? Someone who kills their child's murderer. Technically, they took away someone else's child, but they're the victim in their child's story. Now, in this case, I believe that there were 5 victims. Obviously, the children and also the parents. Based on the evidence I have thus far, I don't believe that there was a villain in that family. I believe that Lindsay is responsible for what happened. I believe that she's to blame for what happened, but she's not a villain. Sometimes postpartum psychosis happens and there's really no one to villainize, even if something awful happened as a result of it. Should Patrick have left her alone with the kids when he knew she was having thoughts of harming them? Probably not, but he didn't really know the extent to which she was having those thoughts. And when you find yourself in a situation like that, you never think that something like that will happen to you, especially if the other person isn't acting very outwardly psychotic or telling you about their delusions. We are all just one small mistake from absolute destruction. Never think that you are above that, because the universe will humble you. Maybe he wasn't as supportive of a husband as he should have been. I don't know. I don't know very much about their marriage. It's possible. That doesn't mean he's to blame for what happened. Plenty of people are subpar partners, but I don't think any of us would say, therefore, they deserve to have their partner murder their entire family. If anyone is to blame, to be honest, I feel like it's the mental health providers, or at the very least, the medical system as a whole. Despite how much therapists are encouraged to sort of protect themselves from legal repercussions when there's risk involved, it is for some reason remarkably hard to find help for someone in psychosis. Only someone at absolute rock bottom, who feels like they're going to hurt themselves or others imminently, can be kept safe. Otherwise, the system just lets them get sicker and sicker and sicker. And in this case, Lindsay Clancy did ask for help. She did ask to be hospitalized, and the providers turned her away. And the last thing I wish people understood about this is that these are real human beings on the other side of the screen. These are not characters for your entertainment. These are not protagonists in a thriller novel. People are treating this like it's a psychological thriller they're watching, with like a plot twist, like the conspiracy that Patrick was the male voice telling her to do it because he wanted to start a new life with his new wife. Listen, I get it. It does make me a little uneasy to see how he moved on so quickly with someone who has such a striking resemblance to Lindsay. It kind of reminds me of the book The Push. In the book, a couple loses their child, and afterwards the husband is able to just sort of start over and have a do-over family with a younger wife. But even if this is what Patrick did, even if he did just replace Lindsay with someone new, put a band-aid over his trauma, I wouldn't blame him. Who wouldn't wish to just close their eyes and have a do-over? To have it all feel like it was just a bad dream. To wake up to a reality where it doesn't feel like it happened. But unlike The Push, these are real people. These are not characters. And we don't know what happened, and we don't have all the information, and we could be wrong in our assumptions. In my opinion, it's so much worse to assume ill intent of someone who is actually innocent than it is to give someone the benefit of the doubt and find out that they were not as good as you assumed. You know, I've had a couple situations this past year where I gave a public figure the benefit of the doubt and they ended up disappointing me, but I don't regret it. I would do it again just the same, because I would rather be somebody who gives people the benefit of the doubt and is proven wrong than to be someone who automatically projects the worst of intentions onto an innocent person. I mean, try to imagine for a moment what it must feel like for thousands of people to suddenly have eyes on you and demonize you over an assumption that maybe isn't even true, all because they're picking sides as if they're watching a soccer match, or more accurately, a gladiator match. All the while, a few years ago, you just violently lost your entire family. Can you imagine the absolute misery of that? That not only you went through one of the most traumatic things a person can go through, but now you're being re-traumatized by the fact that this has been made public. This is the issue with televising court trials and publicizing police body cam footage. All it takes is being questioned by the police, maybe for something you weren't even involved in or guilty over, for suddenly any expectation of privacy to go out the window. Privacy is a basic human right, regardless of whether or not you committed a crime. I feel like we owe people privacy just the same as we owe prisoners food and shelter, because it's a human right. It is genuinely so bizarre how the US doesn't see that. You know, like public figures at least usually have a more gradual adjustment to this type of public scrutiny, but what kind of protection do just regular civilians have who go from being private citizens to one day being put on blast by the entire internet? If I could just ask you one thing, you know, before you type out something hateful, ask yourself, what is your end goal? Are you making the world a better or worse place? And be really honest with yourself, because you know, a lot of people will say, no, I'm standing up up for injustice, I'm making the world a better place. No, you're fucking not. What do you want? Do you want this person to take their own life? If they do, will you feel good about yourself? If they turned out to be innocent of the thing that you assumed they did, will you be able to live with yourself? To you and me, it might feel insignificant, just a few words typed on a screen. But to the person you're talking about, it could genuinely be the thing that pushes them over the edge. So anyway, those are just some thoughts that I had, some things that I wish people understood before consuming this case like a form of entertainment. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your week.